Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You are on the sidelines with the sideline guys for another MMA edition of the show. And this time around, I have the pleasure by being joined by none other than a man who shares a lot of things with me, but most chief among them, my last name, my brother from another mother, from another motherfucking nationality, my guy, Sean Negron. How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well, man. You look good. You look good. New look, new face. This is I like this new look of you. I see a new background back there. Is this a new Leaf Chris? 2 years of just failing in the MMA picks and dynasty, and you just needed to change it up. It looks like. So I like the motivation behind this look, man. This looks really good.
Mhm.
Explain more on why you went with this look because this is an incredible look.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I got a haircut as soon as I moved out here, and I told them, I was like, I want to go low with the beard, right? But I want to keep it low. Whoa, shout out to that. I want to go low with the beard, right? I want to bring it down a little bit. But then by the time it was too late, right, to say anything, he brought it down to a one. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Just fade the bitch and let's go. So yeah, I'm liking it. I obviously I'm gonna grow it back, but why not, right? Why not switch it up a little bit, keep you on your toes? But enough about me. If you're looking to see more of this beautiful mug, why don't you follow the brand at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube, so you never miss another awesome episode of The Sideline Guys and all the other awesome shows we got coming at you at OTS. And while you're following the brand, make sure you follow me as well at Negron MMA on Twitter, as well as TikTok and Chris Negron _ on Instagram. So, Sean, where can the people find all of your BS reports?
Well, you can find me at bsreports.org anytime you want. And, maybe 2025, maybe 2026 we'll get Chris's debut. I will continue to bring that up until, he eventually does join. He's literally changed area codes, but, still hasn't written his first article. But besides that, I'm very excited for any of you that want to jump in and get started in the sports journey. I will help you. Just reach out to me on the bottom of the website. My email's there, and I'll help you get started.
You heard the man. I will be following that advice at some point in the near future, but I've said that for a while now. So Lord knows, Lord knows. But this is a new year, right? A new amazing year. And in this new year, hey, I got smoked week one, but week two, we bouncing back, baby. I ended up finishing the pick 'em 6-7, which brought my record for 2025 to 14-13 for an abysmal 51.85%. But we gonna get right this week. My guy Sean acting like he's doing spectacular, but he went 8-5 last week, bringing his total to 17-10 for 62.96% on the pick'em. So he is currently leading in the pick'ems. I'm not surprised, motherfuckers. But last week, despite having an awful week one in Dynasty, I bounced back. I had a winning week against Sean where I went 6-5. He went 5-4. So my Dynasty total for 2025 is 6-8, 42.86%, while Sean is sitting at 11-6, 64.7%. We got a lopsided week this week, though. So I'm looking to bounce back. I got a lot more fighters than you this week. And we got some head-to-heads. So there's a lot of opportunity here for me to make the big bounce back, make the big comeback. But of course, it's only right before we move on, I give you the Dynasty totals right now. As it sits, it is very close. I am sitting at 201 wins, 125 losses, 2 draws, 4 no contests for a total of 61.45%, while Sean is sitting at 205 wins, 126 losses, 1 draw, and 3 no contests for a win percentage of 61.79. So as totaled 2025, Sean is just 4-0ing me, right? He's just sweeping me. But it's okay because I'm going to bounce back, and this prick is not going to be happy for much longer. So with all the pleasantries out of the way, let's get right into our 11-fight card for UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia. We start in the heavyweight division with Hamdy Abdelwahab, a minus 110 favorite, going up against Jamal Pogues, who comes back minus 107. All of these odds are the best you can get on fightodds.com, so make sure you check it out so you can see where you could get this actual number. But it's only right that we start off with a fight that none of us are invested in, right? We got no dynasty talk here, so I'll lead the dance. I'll do you a favor, Sean. I know you're not too prepared. It's been a while, so I got you. I'll lead off the dance here. As far as this heavyweight matchup, this is a funny fight because I think as I was looking at both of these fighters' careers, there's a lot of things that stand out as far as the intangibles, right? There's a lot of things that should be happening with these guys that isn't. So I'll start with Jamal Pogues, right? This is someone who once fought all the way down at middleweight, right? And is now all the way back up at heavyweight. This is somebody who, in his most recent fight against Thomas Peterson, obviously got a really nice win. But also, I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. I think ultimately the big X factor in this heavyweight matchup is really how these guys show up on the week. I think Hamdy Abdelwahab, coming off of a big layoff since his last fight where he got a win against Dontel Mays, but it got overturned into a no contest due to a drug test failure, 2 drug test failures, if I'm not mistaken, left him sidelined for 2 years. So he's making a big comeback after that. And I think ultimately this fight really comes down to, like I said, where these guys are at this point in time. Now, as far as the matchup, I like Jamal Pogues and his skill set, despite his inconsistency. I think he really does have a smaller man's game in a heavyweight's body. I really like his straight shots, and I think his ability to keep the pressure on guys can definitely make a difference in this matchup. But ultimately, though, I end up leaning towards Hamdy Abdelwahab here. I think in the matchup with Dontel Mays, he fought, in my opinion, a slicker version of the same test he's going to be getting here. And I think what really stood out to me was how ahead he was in the grappling phases against Dontel Mays, someone who has submission victories on his ledger in the UFC, but honestly was out of his depth when it came to the wrestling. Obviously, Hamdy, a Egyptian world-class wrestler, wrestled for the Egyptian Olympic team. That's a motherfucking tongue twister right there. But didn't ultimately place. I think this fight can be fun. It can be interesting. If all things considered, right? If I thought both of these guys were going to come in phenomenal shape and look great, I'm probably going to pick Jamal Pogues. But all things considered, I think ultimately Hamdy, with his grappling edge, should be able to get the job done regardless of how these guys show up. So give me Hamdy Abdelwahab.
Yeah, I'm taking Hamdy too, and this is actually kind of a funny one because it's almost exactly to what you said. So not to repeat you, but you got a guy coming off of 2 years substance ban, and then Jamal Pogues has nowhere near met what I was hoping to see from him. You know me, I'm always about experience and about, like if you have the experience here or you've been active, I always will go that route. But in this one, I feel like Hamdy's grappling is going to be detrimental for someone like Jamal. I don't know how they can overcome it because for Hamdy, I feel like it's like a brand new fighter, right? 2.5 years off. Haven't really seen him, has, basically nothing on his resume, very small MMA action, and it's heavyweight. So it's not like they're coming back ripped, like you were saying before, like in sort of shape. They're big heavyweights coming in. You have no idea what Hamdy has been doing for the last 2.5 years. And even in his last win that got overturned, it wasn't, anything spectacular. A split decision. It was, honestly, a little closer than I thought it was going to be the first time. So, I would go with Jamal, but in this one, I just feel like it's going to be very slow. And, I honestly don't know how Hamdy's going to look. This is one of the very few fights I've ever had on this show where it's such a complete question mark on how good Hamdy's going to look. coming out of the ring rust. So I pick him in this one because of the wrestling. But if Jamal goes in and just dominates, I wouldn't be surprised either, because Jamal's had, the time in the UFC, and has been, even though the loss to McParkin and who's the guy he just beat, but
my guy Thomas Peterson.
Thomas Peterson, yes,
the most presidential man in MMA.
I was about to say Thomas Kennedy, but yes, Thomas Peterson. Even in that, wasn't enough for me. And so I just, like I said, I think this is a card built for people of Hamdy's stature in the grappling world, and I'm going to have to pick Hamdy on this one.
I love that. I think the biggest key to victory for Jamal Pogues is putting the pressure on him. I think he is a bigger heavyweight that can dish out high output, and that'll be his path to victory. But yeah, I agree. Skills pay the bills, and ultimately it's hard to bet against that wrestling pedigree. Next up, we move on to the featherweight division. This is an interesting one. Obviously, I've got some stock here. My guy, Lucas Alexander, is representing the team here. We got Bogdan Grad making his UFC debut, coming off of the Contender Series and a nice win he got there. Plus 110 going up against the returning Lucas Alexander, minus 120, coming off of a big knockout loss to Jeka Saragi in a fight where actually, you know what? I'm going to hold that for later. Sean, why don't you let me know how you're feeling about this matchup?
Another one where it's kind of an unknown. So I feel like I'm going to take the trend of taking the unknown here in Bogdan. His split decision win in the Contender Series was not something I was excited about, to be honest with you. I really was high on Bogdan watching the Contender Series, and I felt like he didn't, fill out to snuff. I felt like he underperformed to what I was expecting. But I was glad that he ended up getting, a UFC contract to be in this moment. And you know what? It goes down to ring rust here as well, where Lucas Alexander's been off for, I think, 15, 16 months. And even in his knockout loss to Saragi, he was overweight. He didn't make weight. You could tell that, camp wasn't good to him. He came in, like I said, overweight. So, there was just not a lot of discipline there. So with that always bothers me, because I always feel like if you weigh over the limit, you already have the advantage. Yes, you lose 30% of your purse, but not having to make that cut and already being probably 5-something pounds over and whatever that, I feel like if they had a poll on every time someone has missed weight, they probably have the advantage of winning. I wonder what the numbers are. So I'm not high on Lucas Alexander. I know he's on your team, and that's not, I understood why you picked him in that moment, but I have to pick Bogdan here. I have a feeling he's going to come in and have, a lot to prove here. Two low-level fighters right now, but that can easily change with one great performance by Bogdan here or Lucas. So give me Bogdan here. I'm going to say by split decision.
Whew, I love it. We're starting early with some controversy, because obviously it seems a little intuitive that I'd be picking my dynasty fighter. But when I dug into the tape here, what I was most shocked by actually was Bogdan Grad's success, because with all due respect, he has what I like to call the new influx of that Trickus du Plessis MMA skills, right? This man is going to go out there. It's not going to look good, right? It's not going to feel good, but God damn it, it's effective and it gets the job done. What a scrap he had with Mr. Aswell, I believe Michael Aswell, on the Contender Series. Just an absolute back and forth war. In my opinion, both of those guys really deserved a contract coming off of that fight, because you could have argued it went either way. As far as this matchup, the only thing that makes me so confident, and the reason why I'm staying on the Lucas Alexander train, is I think the skills are so evident, right? I think ultimately it's just a matter of finding a place to execute those skills. I think even in the Jeka Saragi fight, man, before the finishing sequence, he rocked Jeka twice. He was in a good position to win that fight, landing nasty, crisp, straight shots, but ended up just getting clipped in transition. And the shit happens in MMA. There's 1,000 ways to die. And of course, it got me a little worried here, right? In a fight where Bogdan Grad's going to go out there and implement his game. He's got good offensive wrestling in addition to some really good striking on the feet. But I just think the physicality of Lucas Alexander at this weight class is going to be the biggest difference. I love his front kicks up the middle and his low leg kicks as well. They really set up his straight shots and also his uppercuts. This matchup, skill for skill, I think is easier to pick as far as leaning towards Lucas Alexander. But I agree with you, man. The intangibles here of the athlete that is Bogdan Grad and what he can accomplish makes it a little difficult. I think his best path to victory would be wrestling Lucas Alexander, getting him to the ground. But it's going to be a matter of whether or not he can do that in space, in my opinion. I think if they're up against the fence, I think Lucas Alexander has shown that he's pretty good at retaining his base there and getting up. So I like this fight for Lucas. I think ultimately the straight shots are going to be the difference because Bogdan Grad's defense is virtually non-existent, right? The head stays on the center line, and that was the hardest thing for me to get past in this fight. So I'm confident in Lucas Alexander here. I was actually pretty surprised at where the odds sit, but obviously, given where he's at, being a 1-2 fighter in the UFC, it makes sense. But hey, that other loss was against Joe Anderson Brito, who's absolutely shown to be a monster in this division as well. So Lucas Alexander, you got a bright future ahead of you. Let's start showing it now, right? Let's start making sure we make that happen and start my team off with a nice dub early. So we're going with Lucas Alexander. Next up, we move on to the women's flyweight division. It's important that I make that asterisk because Mayra Bueno Silva is coming back down to her original weight class in the UFC. The number 12 ranked Jasmine Jasudavicious minus 225 against the 7th ranked bantamweight Mayra Bueno Silva. I am also invested in this fight as I am also an owner of Mayra Bueno Silva. So you might guess where I'm leaning here, but I'm going to be real with you here. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. I swear I'm not just picking my fighters. But after I finished watching the tape on this fight, I could not believe the odds. Like, I generally could not believe that the odds are where they sit. I think even watching Mayra Bueno's fights at flyweight against people like Manon Fiorot, she was never outclassed or outstrengthed. And I think the quality of athlete here is really what's going to make the difference for Mayra Bueno Silva. I think she has lightning fast kicks that could really damage Jasmine, especially with the way she likes to enter on her takedowns. So look out for those calf kicks from Mayra Bueno Silva. I think it's in her best interest to try to keep things at range here. I think she's a much better striker at range than Jasmine. And obviously the closer they get to the ground, the more of a chance that Jasmine has to implement that game, right? She's a grinder. She will get on top and really pick you apart, right? I was really proud of her performance against Ariana Da Silva. I picked her to lose in that fight just because of all the improvements we've seen out of Da Silva. But she made it look easy, right? She went out there, mixed the martial arts beautifully, and ultimately, once she started getting her down, it was really easy to continue to overwhelm her there. Ultimately, the reason why I feel confident in Mayra Bueno Silva coming back down to flyweight is she wasn't overpowered in that way against Macy Chasson in her last fight. And just look at the difference in physicality between Macy and Jasmine. Obviously, making this weight takes a lot out of you. But I think ultimately, between going back to 125 and training with one of the best up-and-coming teams in MMA right now, the Fighting Nerds, I think it's going to make a big difference for Mayra Bueno Silva. So give me the dog, baby. We barking early.
Sorry, that took a second. Yeah, no, I'm picking Bueno Silva here too, Jesus, honestly, it has to do with the weight cut. If Mayra can have a good weight cut here, back to 125, I think she'll be completely fine. I think she's a way bigger and stronger fighter than Jasmine, whatever. For me, yes, I think these odds are crazy just because Silva's coming off of back-to-back losses. But her the loss she just had to Macy, I honestly had that 1-1. Like, I thought it was finally, Bueno Silva's taking over in that fight. It's just a nasty cut that got it stopped. But, it's just, we forget that a year ago she was fighting for the title. So it's when I saw this fight announced, I was actually surprised at first. Like, how is, Bueno Silva's fall off this crazy? So, like, in a year. And I feel like the disrespect is, a lot crazier in the odds than they are in what they should be in reality. Yes, she's going, down in weight, but I still think that even if she wanted to be at 135, she'd still be a top contender. I think, she didn't have the best game plan when it came to the title fight. You know, it obviously was a title fight nobody, I should say, care about, but it was still a title fight, right? And you beat it Holly home. That ended up being, yes, the drug test and no contest, but you know, she has an impressive resume. So to see her lose, you know, via doctor stoppage and a cut, like I feel like it's just been bad luck in all three. Beating Holly Holm, turning into a no contest, losing the title, and losing a doctor stoppage in a fight I felt like she had fully taken over. And she was about to win easily, or I should say easily, win by decision if it headed into a third round. But, you know, and I give all the credit to Jasmine. I really do, because she's done really well for herself. I remember when she first started, I didn't have that much of high hopes for her. But beating Miranda Maverick, and like, I think for me, when she lost to Tracy Cortez, that's when I was like, I don't know if she could take that next step. But she's won 3 in a row since then, and she's looking like a real dynamic and dominant fighter in this division. But I just think that for someone like Bueno Silva going back down, she's just so much stronger. I think she's going to do really well when it comes to the grappling and really control the game on the ground. And I think people are trying to forget about Bueno Silva being in a title fight, like I just said before. I think her ground game is incredible. I think even Jasmine's ground game is good. So it's going to be a really good fight. All grappling, I think, involved. I think it's a tough test for both. But as long as Mayra has a great weight cut, I think this is her fight to lose, honestly. I would be very surprised if she did lose this fight, and I think this would get her right back into top 5 contendership in this weight and really be a threat, and people will remember the name. Will really remember who Mayra Bueno Silva is.
Hey, shout out Fort Minor. Another little sneaky aspect of this fight is I think Mayra Bueno Silva's skills against the cage, even when she's put against the cage, slick submissions, and I think she's live to finish Jasmine here. Honestly, I'm really surprised that you agree with me, because as I felt so confident that I psyched myself out, right? I'm like, I have to be biased. But yeah, this one was really strange to me, so I might be hammering this line. But next up, we move on to the lightweight division, a fight that is appropriately lined, if you ask me. We got Terrance McKinney, minus 455, going up against Damir Hadzovic at plus 380. Coming back from a big layoff is Damir Hadzovic, 3 years, and if I'm not mistaken, he is now 38 years old. So, Sean, how you feeling about this lightweight tilt?
Glass cannon. This is either McKinney's knocking him out early or he's dead after 2. So for me, I have to believe that this fight's made to hype the crowd up, because Terrance McKinney is one of the very few fighters that we have that are so hit or miss. And it's either they go guns blazing and knocks them out, or gets the submission within the first round, maybe second, or you see him heavy breathing, can't lift the arms, by the 10th minute mark. So I think this fight is perfectly made for McKinney to excite the crowd. You got Damir coming back 3 years old, way past his prime. I think this is very much made for McKinney here. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't pull this one off. I think that's why the odds are as high as they are. So give me McKinney by first round knockout.
That's tough. Honestly, I think his easiest path to victory would be taking down Damir Hadzovic. But I do agree with you in that sense. I think if I'm Terrance McKinney, yeah, I think I can dominate on the ground. But let's try to get this guy out of there early, because in my opinion, I agree, the longer we stick around, the tougher this fight can become. I think ultimately, though, if he does stay on the feet for a long time with Damir, he's just playing Russian roulette. Like, why? Like, no disrespect. This guy just got controlled by Mark Diakase for 3 rounds straight, and there was no attempts at hip bumps, no attempts at getting up for multiple rounds. Like, in my opinion, this is an easy MMA math kind of fight. We take you down, we win the fight. I'm going Terrance McKinney by first round rear naked choke. But next up, we move on to a head-to-head heavyweight matchup in the Dynasty rankings. We got Shamil Gaziev, the number 14th rank Shamil Gaziev, minus 340, going up against my guy, Thomas Peterson, plus 280, the most presidential man in MMA, which we have just spoken about. Now, I'm glad I get to lead the dance on this one, because I get to be a homer again, right? I get to show all you guys that no matter what, I'm going to be picking my fighters. But in all honesty, I came into this fight and the tape studying, wanting to pick Shamil. I was like, yo, I'm pretty sure this guy's gonna get sent. And then actually, I was very pleasantly, not presently, surprised at how good Thomas Peterson looked in his last fight against Muhammad Usman. I think a big reason why he lost that fight against Jamal Pogues was his unwillingness to engage on the feet. I think at a certain range, he was just like, you know what? I'll just wait for my chance to get a takedown. And that was the opposite with Muhammad Usman. He only got the takedowns after entirely establishing the threat of that southpaw right hook and the straight left, which he's developed really well. In my opinion, I think the only way Thomas Peterson loses this fight with the pace he sets, and Shamil Gaziev has shown to be Mr. Gassy himself, right? Even in fights where he's won, like his last fight against Dontel Mays. He finished the first round in top position, right, where you want to be, and came out the second round absolutely mouth-breathing gassed. So this is a dangerous fight because of that, because of the pace that Thomas Peterson sets. I think it's never going to look like, oh my God, Thomas Peterson got this nasty striking that's going to knock out Shamil. I don't think so. I think it's going to be more so waterboarding, right? The more up and down you make Shamil work, the better, because Thomas Peterson, if he's proven anything in his MMA career, is that he has a gas tank that is uncommon for this weight class. And it's going to be up to him to push the pace in this one. But ultimately, I think the biggest key for victory here, of any of the skills that I've noticed Thomas Peterson working on, if you're going to throw that outside southpaw body kick, throw it to the fucking body. Don't throw it to the legs, because you're asking to be taken down. Muhammad Usman wasn't able to capitalize on those leg kicks, but man, they're so slow. Like, you see him coming from a mile away. If you're going to throw that kick, please just throw it to the body and leave it alone, right? Don't give him a chance to bowl you over, because I think if Shamil Gaziev gets top position, I think we're going to be stuck there for the rest of the round, which is not a good look, especially in a fight where you're trying to outwork your opponent. So ultimately, though, I think the newest skills of Thomas Peterson and his tenacity is what gets him the win here. So give me the most presidential man in MMA.
Yeah, for me, this is a funny one, because I think Shamil is known for being kind of like the butt end of the joke when it came to that Rosenstrike fight, for having literally zero gas tank when it came going into after the 15 minutes. Thank God this is only 15 minutes, because it seems like it's the case where he is done after 5, or he is having a really tough time. So I hope I'm picking Shamil here, because that Thomas Peterson loss to Pogues bothers me to my core. And even though you beat Muhammad Usman, like, that means almost nothing to me because of the name. I get it. But also, Usman's had some very questionable ones. Even losing the one to McParkin was a little questionable. But obviously, I don't think Usman was really top caliber guy. Like, I think the name really got him the attention he needed. But I think for some, in this situation, Peterson has so much to prove. And if he can go out there and dominate Shamil in the first 5 minutes and dominate the whole fight, I'll turn the page on what I thought about Thomas Peterson, and I'll legitimately give him a chance. But in this one, I feel like this is one where it's going to be not crazy when it comes to the knockout sort of power from Shamil, but I think he'll do enough to get him clipped once, maybe even take him to the ground. I just hope that going into round 2, Shamil, can close his mouth when he's breathing. He can breathe through his nose a little bit, and he can, continue to push on the gas pedal, because that seems to be his problem. Is he could be something great in this division if he could just, develop cardio. I get it. He's a big fucking dude. I'm a big fucking dude. I don't have the cardio. Hell no. But for someone like him, he has the tools to be a great fighter. But his number one thing is that he has no cardio. So he can have all the tools you want, but if you can't lift your arms anymore, it's going to be a bad night. So I think in this one, talent-wise, I think Shamil's a better fighter. But I really want to see when it comes to rounds 2 what type of fighter is Shamil going to be. But I think being kind of in a hometown environment here, I think this one is built for him. I'm not saying this is hometown type environment. I think this one is made for him to really turn the page here. I think a lot of these fighters get these sort of cards because either visa issues or just because it feels like home to them. And I think this is a hometown fight for him and a lot of these fighters, especially the fight we have next. So I'm picking Shamil here, but I would not be surprised if Thomas Peterson is clubbing his head in by, the 8th minute of this fight. So give me Shamil.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first round is going to be probably an ass whooping. Like I think the Thomas Peterson's biggest asset here is his toughness and being able to get past that initial onslaught. But yeah, man, I think I agree with you. The biggest shame of Shamil's career will end up being if he never resolves this issue, in my opinion, because I do agree. I think, honestly, based on his frame, I think he'd be a better light heavyweight than a heavyweight. But clearly he has no interest in doing that. Yeah, man, I think ultimately, though, skill for skill, Shamil is the way better fighter. I like his top rides even better than Thomas Peterson's. But just the gas tank I've seen from Thomas Peterson and his ability to avoid those fight-ending shots, right? Never been finished in the UFC. I think that's important. So this is going to be a fun one, and I think it's really going to be about forcing Shamil to run with him, right? That's the only way you're really going to win here. If he's getting top position and he's chilling, yeah, he gets tired doing that too, but he ain't going to get as tired as if you're pushing him back. And the biggest reason why I'm confident here is just the difference you see in the kind of fight that he's trying to accomplish in those two fights. Like, I agree. If his last fight was the Jamal Pogues fight, I'm 100% picking Shamil here. But I think regardless of opponent, I think his ability to put the pressure on Mo Usman is going to be the biggest difference here. But we move on to the lightweight division. We've got Muhammad Naimov. No, wait, this is the featherweight division. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Muhammad Naimov, the pride of Tajikistan, minus 300, going up against Kaan Ofli plus 270. This fight is untouched, unscathed. None of these guys are owned on Dynasty. So, Sean, why don't you lead the dance? Who you liking in featherweight?
This one is interesting because, man, I've talked about Muhammad Naimov so many times about how much I love this fighter. And I just feel like, I don't know. For me, it's like it bothers me. I feel like his story should be so much better. But I think this fight is perfectly made to kind of where I am as a fan with him, right the ship. I think Muhammad Naimov has all the experience here. I feel like they kind of did Ofli a huge disservice coming over from the not Contender Series, the
Ultimate Fighter.
Tough. And I feel like Tough has kind of produced mediocre fighters at best. I haven't seen really top tier talent come from Tough in a good minute now. So I think to get someone like Naimov in your second fight after you just got knocked out in your first one, I think really fucks him up. I hate that for Kaan. I really do. Because I think Naimov is one. I mentioned this in the fight before where it seems like he only fights in like Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. I don't know if there's like an issue there that makes him only fight here or he just loves fighting here only because I feel like I've only seen him in this sort of scenery every time. So this is another one of those like hometown fights. Yes, I know he lost to Felipe Lima in his last fight and the last time he was in Saudi Arabia. But we've seen him in some situations where people call him the serial cheater because this dude always finds a way to grab the fence, clip some gloves. He's a whatever it takes to win sort of guy. So a guy with this much experience and obviously the grappling is going to be, I think, crazy in difference wise. I don't even like this fight. And I rarely say that. I usually love every fight, or I have like a superior, like, oh, this guy's gonna win. I feel this, or I know the UFC is picking this one because of, they want this fighter to thrive. They don't care about this one, but I just don't like this one. I feel like this is a huge disservice to Ofli, who I feel like could be something if he had a more non-UFC type fighter in the second fight. Getting someone like Naimov right out the rips after getting knocked out, I feel like is going to be even worse night than the first fight. So to me, I think this one's not even close. I think this one ends in the first round. If it goes to the second, whatever. But I think this one is super one-sided. Naimov all day to get him back in the win column.
Yeah, man. I guess coming off of a loss to one Felipe Lima gets you a little bit of a cushion, right? Gets you a little bit of a softer fight. And even against that fight, man, I came away impressed by Muhammad Naimov. But I think the key to this one and what ultimately I thought lost him that Felipe Lima fight was maintaining the initiative. I think even in this fight, if Kaan Ofli is able to push him back and really work his game, I think this could be a dangerous fight too. I think ultimately, though, I've been so impressed by Muhammad Naimov's just ability in general, right? He's out there switching stances on the regular. He shows you all the skills on the feet in addition to all the skills on the ground, right? So there's just a lot of untapped potential there. I think a fight like this is actually good for him, though, right? Gets you to bounce back after taking a big loss against someone that nobody heard of, right? So great fight, in my opinion, for the position he's in, but also a great way to showcase his talent. I agree with you here. I think ultimately, though, this one is not for Genghis Khan. I think this one is made for Muhammad Naimov. And we agree. So next up, we move on to the lightweight division. Sean, pound for pound, this might be my favorite fight on the motherfucking card. And I got both of these guys on my dynasty team. So I guess it makes sense. We got Majin, Mike Davis, minus 140 going up against Fares Ziam, plus 120. Fares coming off of that big knee knockout against Matt Frivola. Mike Davis coming off of a huge submission win against one Natan Levy. He did it for Palestine. Shout out, let's go. But as far as this matchup goes, this one's a hard one for me to pick because I think both of these guys are really skilled. Ultimately, though, I'm leaning with Mike Davis here because I think he has the complete skill set. Obviously, we saw Fares Ziam actually successfully wrestle Matt Frivola in a way that nobody saw coming in his last fight. But I think ultimately Mike Davis has the better grappling skills in addition to having the more explosive striking game. I like Fares Ziam's length and his ability to find shots, even in close. Like he has really good uppercuts, really good hooks, despite being so lanky. But I think ultimately Mike Davis is just a different caliber of athlete. This is somebody that I've been screaming at the top of my lungs about his prospects in the UFC since his fight on the Contender Series with Sadiq Youssef. I think still to this day, the best fight in Contender Series history. I think Mike Davis is just a four-tool player, man. This guy can do it all. And I think ultimately he ends up taking down Fares Ziam and getting a submission here. I think his skills in the grappling realm are that much better than Fares Ziam's. The more they play on the feet, don't get me wrong, I think Mike Davis could finish Fares Ziam on the feet, but I think it's just inviting a lot more danger than necessary here. Now, the question is, can Mike Davis get a takedown in the middle of the cage? I think the closer he is to the fence, the harder it's going to be to consistently get Fares Ziam down. The dude is one of the biggest lightweights on the roster. It's like trying to take down a table, right? One of those legs is going to land, right? No matter what. So I think ultimately if Mike Davis could get him down towards the center of the cage, he should be able to work his way to a submission. But either way, whichever way this fight goes, I think it's going to be fucking phenomenal. I think on the feet, the exchanges are going to be wild. And in the grappling, I don't think Fares Ziam is the pushover he used to be. But I still think that's where his deficiencies lie. So give me the favorite, Mike Davis.
I like it. I'm taking Fares here. I think this is a great fight. Probably my number 2 favorite fight going into this card. The only thing that gets me a little bit is Mike Davis having 5 fights in 6 years. I feel like that always plays a factor. This one, I think if Ziam can find a way to keep the fight at range and avoid these really long exchanges that Mike tends to, jump out and try to do, I think he can outpoint Davis. I don't think Ziam's going to have enough to knock him out. I don't. But I think this is one where he's the hometown fighter here. I think he's going to have a lot more chip on his shoulder here. I understand I understand the odds a little bit, but I feel like Ziam could be. It should have been the favorite here. I think this is one where experience comes into play, and I've said this to you about Mike Davis before, but I never know what I'm getting from him. One night I feel like he's on top of the fucking world, where he could be a real threat to the lightweight division if he just continues to have, not experience, but just constant consistency and just keep going. Have 2-3 fights a year. But I feel like I just never get that out of him anymore, or ever, since he's joined the UFC. So I feel like this is one where every time he steps in, I feel like I'm getting a new type of guy, or someone who really takes a toll in every fight he goes into and has a really tough exchange coming back for his next one. So I don't know if it has to do with the layoff because he wants to have it, or each fight really takes a toll on him, physically and mentally. But I feel like Mike Davis is one of those guys who will never really excel forward in this division because of his lack of getting into the octagon so consistently. So for me, I think Ziam has a real chance here to knock out a bigger name in the lightweight division, and right outside I would say right outside the 25, maybe 30. So he can put himself right there at close to being in a ranked lightweight fight in maybe his next one. So I have to go with the guy who has more to prove and wants it more. I'm not saying that Mike Davis doesn't want it, but I just don't know what's in his mindset. I feel like the technical striking and range management is the key for Mike Davis to win this fight. But I think if Ziam can take that, and from all the film from those 5 fights in the last 6 years, and can just constantly put pressure, keep going backwards, and just keep touching him up, I really do think he can win this one via points. So I'm saying unanimous decision, but it bothers me because I really wish Mike Davis could be more of a consistent fighter, because I thought there was a time where he could have been something big for this division.
Yeah, man, this is all the untapped potential here. I think ultimately the odds, I would agree with the odds, but I like the way you're thinking, man. I think it's easier to lean towards someone that's more active. I just feel like skills pays the bills, man. And I think Mike Davis is one of the most skilled lightweights out there. But I agree, it's weird. In his last fight after the win, submitted Natan Levy with a beautiful arm triangle choke, and then gets on the mic and talks about how, this isn't what he wants to do. This is his job. And you see that shine through with his activity, right? It makes sense. So I agree with you, man. Sometimes you got to lean towards the heart, right, and the gameness in the fighter out there. But ultimately, I'm sticking with Mike Davis. Skills pay the bills, and I think he's got them. We move on to the bantamweight division. We've got another Nurmagomedov, but this one of no relation. Saeed Nurmagomedov, minus 160, going up against Vinicius Oliveira, plus 140. This is another one of those fights where none of us have any involvement, right? We just get to sit back and enjoy the show. This fight is awesome, Sean, so I can't wait to hear which side of the fence you're on.
This is a tough one for me because this is the one. I do this every card where I leave the one blank because I don't know who I want, and I always say I'll figure it out in the moment. Because this one, honestly, makes me feel like this is Seth's fight to lose. But I can't take anything away from Oliveira here because he's had such an impressive 3-fight or UFC run, I should say. The flying knee to Sopaj was fucking incredible. I think it won fight of the night, performance of the night. It won like almost every award on that night. And then the domination on Ricky Simon, I didn't expect that either. So he's done nothing but surprise me here. But Seth is the king of I'm not going to fight. He's going to book a fight and then leave the fight. Something happens, can't make it, toenail hurts. Something always comes into play and how he can never fight. So I won't believe this fight is happening until I see the both of them in there and the door finally gets locked. Because even then, something might happen. Somehow the lights cut and he's out. He disappears like Houdini. I don't know because I feel like I can never see this guy in the fucking octagon. So for me, everything tells me to go with Oliveira here. And if you take their last names, this could have been like a fucking showdown like 5 years ago. of like a hell of a fight in the lightweight division. So this is actually, it's like a kind of like it's like the Walmart version of like what UFC fans are asking for. Like, yeah, Nurmagomedov versus Oliveira. You're like, really? And this is what you get. You're like, what the hell? Like, this isn't it. So this is a great fight. It really is. It's a fantastic fight. Strong wrestling, strong grappling. I think, like I said, Oliveira's been so impressive. And every part of me wants to pick Said because I think he is just the more superior grappler when it comes to this and so much better of a wrestler. And I think he's done better. And what was it, Gafarov in his last fight? That was a really good win. Coming off of his last fight, I was super impressed with the Gafarov and how well he performed in that fight. So I'm gonna pick Said in this fight, but I don't like it because, like I said, getting this guy in the ring is the hardest thing to do apparently. So I love Oliveira. I loved what he has done in this UFC tenure in his 3 fights. He's had incredible performances. But I just feel in my heart that because of that Gafarov fight, Said is different. I feel like he looks like a different fighter. Since he lost to Jonathan Martinez, I had to just remember that name and look it up. But like that fight made me think, okay, he's not ready yet. But coming back after, I don't even know how long it's been, like a year or 7, 8 months, and having that dominant win against Gafarov, I was like, wow, okay, this is the guy he's supposed to be. But then you get the Kyle Phillips cancellation, Montel Jackson, Daniel Santos, Daniel Marcos, and now we're here. We're in the 5th fight, 5th name offered to him, and supposedly he's taking it. So that's what makes me so angry with Said Nurmagomedov, because I don't know if he were just to take these fights, or half of them, I feel like he could have already been a ranked fighter by now. But I feel like he's his own worst enemy. I don't know if it's his camps. I know he's changed camps, but I know it's been a tougher road for him to get these fights, while Oliveira's just been nothing but striving. But this is a hometown thing here. I hate saying that almost every fight because they obviously make it for this this card. But give me Said Nurmagomedov here. But I would love, honestly, if Oliveira wins this, because that would be an incredible win to continue on this awesome UFC tenure that he's already built for himself in the bantamweight division. And I would put him, honestly, even though they're both unranked, I would have him right there, maybe 15 or right outside, fighting the gatekeeper of the bantamweights to get back in, because Oliveira deserves it, and Nurmagomedov could be right there if he shows consistency.
Oh man, I just gotta say, either I'm gonna come out of this episode looking like a genius, or I'm gonna look like an absolute fucking idiot, right? Because shout out to that last Drake studio album. This one is for all the dogs, baby. I'm going with Vinicius Oliveira here. The reason why I'm making this pick is because honestly, I was shocked by what an imposing figure this man is at bantamweight. And given the style clash, right? Given the way he looked against Ricky Simon, I think the biggest thing here is I think Said Nurmagomedov, while he is a 4-2 player and could get it done in all different ranges, I think he really prefers to strike. And I think in a matchup like this, no matter what, I think in each exchange, you're opening yourself up to just danger, right? Extreme danger. And I agree with you. That Muin Gafarov fight was super impressive because he got that quick ninja choke. But I don't see Vinicius Oliveira going for a takedown in this matchup. And I don't really see a situation where he would be able to snatch up the taller fighter's neck. I'm really interested by this fight because I think this is going to prove a lot for Vinicius Oliveira's ceiling in this division. I think he is absolutely an imposing figure. And ultimately, what really swayed me in his direction in this fight was that Jonathan Martinez fight, because that game plan of attacking the legs, getting him up against the fence, and just making him small, if it worked for Jonathan Martinez, imagine what someone as big as Vinicius Oliveira could do. I think ultimately, though, Vinicius is a little less technical on the feet, which makes this a little dangerous, right? He could ultimately get clipped by something, and it could be the end of the night. But I think ultimately, each time these guys, like Beyblades, right? Each time these guys smack against each other, there's going to be one that is clearly the more dense, the bigger guy, and the more dangerous guy. And I think Said Nurmagomedov, while his speed and attacks from the outside are as clean as you can get, honestly. He reminds me a lot of Zabit Magomed and they used to train together with those guys in New Jersey. But I think ultimately the difference here is going to be the power and the strength of Vinicius and his ability to just completely chop the legs throughout this fight, even if it's not necessarily leading to him being the clear winner of the first round, right? Just invest in those legs and trust the process. And eventually, I'm pretty sure he should find a way to get at least moments that lead towards winning rounds, right? I think ultimately the more process-driven fighter is Said. So if he wins this fight, I won't be surprised. But I think Vinicius could find those moments to really change the trajectory of the fight and give him a clear round 2 out of 3 of the time. So give me Vinicius Oliveira. Next up, we move on to the big boys, the heavyweight division. And this is a good old dynasty head-to-head, baby. We got number 4 ranked Sergey Pavlovich, a minus 310 favorite on my squad, representing Chris's team, going up against the number 9 ranked Jairzinho Rosenstruik, plus 265. I'm going to say this right off the top, Sean, whatever I say here, nothing matters except for what I'm about to say right now. These odds are not correct. Right? These odds are not correct. Now, does that mean I'm siding with Jairzinho? No, it doesn't. But am I happy picking Sergey Pavlovich at minus 310? Hell no. As a bettor, I'm staying away from this fight entirely. I think, though, what ultimately gives Sergey Pavlovich the edge is I think everyone is kind of underestimating him coming off of a fight where he was fighting a teammate, finding someone he's fought before, but also at an extreme length parity against in Alexander Volkov. I think in this matchup, he has some of those demons back, right? He's fighting a bigger, longer fighter who's going to fight on the outside and try to keep things technical at range, right? But I think ultimately that's always been the downfall of Jairzinho Rosenstruik. I think he has a lot more power in his strikes than he's able to showcase because of how little output he does. And I think ultimately that's going to be the difference here. I think Sergey Pavlovich has proven that he can go the distance. And in a fight like this, I think it's going to come down to who's going to have the greater moments. And I think Sergey Pavlovich is just the guy that's more willing to hit that nitrous button and move forward and land shots. I won't be surprised if this ends up being a unanimous decision win for whoever wins. I think Jairzinho is the king of taking the fight out of the fight at heavyweight. And I think he can also hurt Sergey Pavlovich here, but I'm not picking that to happen. I think Sergey Pavlovich gets it done by unanimous decision.
I would, if I were you, put some money on that because I don't think there's a lot of people who are going to pick it to go to 15 minutes here. This one, I think, is another one of those fights where people try to forget who you are as a fighter. I think Pavlovich is so UFC and the fans and media and anything forget so quickly on a fighter and try to push them away the second they get on a losing streak. They could be the biggest fighter in the world, but the second they lose 2, it's all like, yeah, they're washed, they're gone. They're terrible. They're no longer the guy they used to be. And honestly, I think fighting a teammate brings something out of you, and it's either the anger or sadness. And I feel like Pavlovich wanted nothing to do with that fight, along with Volkov wanted nothing to do with that fight. But Volkov understood, if I remember this correctly. Volkov was like, I got to keep climbing. And it's just, a shitty situation. Like, we have to do this. And Pavlovich was not on board with any of it. But if we remember, I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that because I don't think I'm mixing the names. But and then we forget the Aspinall fight, which was fucking awesome. It was on short notice, right? It was supposed to be a different fight, but it got rescheduled. And then they pushed that fight to be at Madison Square Garden. It was a great event. We were together for it. And You lose to Tom Aspinall, man. It's a tough one. I think I even picked Sergey to win it because I just thought Tom Aspinall coming in on like 3 weeks' notice was a little too tough. But he got it done, man. It was dominant. But people forget like how dominant he was when he came back to the UFC. He was his one loss to Alistair Overeem in his first fight in UFC, and then he came in and dominated first round knockouts all the way throughout. He had the 2.5-year layoff, still was coming back with first round knockouts. Curtis Blades, Tai Tuivasa, Derek Lewis, Shamil, and then you ran into Tom Aspinall, who is fighting for the championship now, and then you're fighting your teammate / best friend in the combat world. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough year, but to write him off against someone like Rosenstrike, who I have on my dynasty, 2 knockout kings and in this division, but I feel like there are levels here. I feel Sergey is still at that level and can easily turn the clock back to a year ago and show people and remember, hey, listen, it's been a rough 2024, even late 2023, but I'm here. Like, I'm still the guy. I'll be fighting Tom again. Because he did say, and Tom said it too, we'll fight again. And he said Sergey's got one of the strongest hands he's ever felt, ever. Like that. He doesn't want to face him again, but he knows he's going to. So I think this one's just that type of situation. It was like when Cyril Gane fought Tai Tuivasa. After people were starting to write off Cyril Gane a little bit, and then he came back and was so dominant. And it's like he's continuing to climb, even though Cyril Gane should not have beaten Volkov in his last fight. But I still think this is one where Sergey knocks him out in the first round. I think Rosenstrike is incredible. I'm not taking anything away from him. Another guy who goes and kills the guy within the first 3 minutes of a fight. I'd be very surprised if it makes it past the first round. But I think Rosenstrike is a little bit more technical, and Sergey's just more dominant, more firepower, and so strong that kind of gives you like Francis Ngannou vibes, where it's like the second you get clipped, you're not getting back up from it. And I think this one is made for Sergey to dominate. I think it'll be a little slower off the first couple minutes, but I think eventually Sergey will clip Rosenstrike before he gets clipped. And I would think these odds should be more -200, but I'm not surprised at all. And Sergey being the favorite, so I'm picking him via knockout.
And just like that, we found our way to the motherfucking co-main event of the evening. We move on to the welterweight division, where we've got number 14 ranked Shara Magomedov -175 going up against the 15 ranked Michael Venom Paige +165. Kind of funny, you get ranked in the UFC. You don't really got to do much nowadays, but that's the state of the welterweight division, right? We got a lot of old motherfuckers trying to find their way out. But I love that Sean gets to lead the dance on this one, because this was my Sean special. This was my, I don't know which way I'm gonna go. So I get to listen and absorb, right, some of the things you got to say about this one before I make any decisions. So who you got in this co-main event? I know you're real big on the bullet.
Ooh, yeah, this is probably my toughest. Even though I do have a winner chosen, this is really tough because this is all about, for me, this is about who we know MVP to be his whole career. And someone like Shara, who's been just so dominant on the rise. Beating someone like Petrosyan in his last fight in dominating fashion. Yeah, that's incredible. It is. But I always saw it as, for MVP coming in, I was worried about the jump from Bellator to UFC. And you know what? The Kevin Holland fight was great. Even though Kevin Holland, I feel, shows who he is more and more, as he's got to get his shit together and kind of comes out for a bag. And I feel like he's not as technical as he should be. When he wants to win, he's a great fighter. But when he comes in just trying to rush a fight, rush to get some quick money, just like the last card he was in, I felt like that's not Kevin Holland. And even though this fight, you saw Kevin Holland getting really frustrated, and you saw by round 3 he was frustrated. He kind of was like quitting on himself, and MVP was great. And then you go to his fight against Ian Gary, MVP, and that fight was actually good. Like, that was close. People found it boring, but it was one of those where it could have gone either way going into that final round. And, Ian Gary just barely prevailed. So I think MVP has done a really good job at the level of competition he's seen. And to go from Ian Gary, who's a fight away from a title, to Shara, who's just now climbing the ranks due to the hype, I feel like that's a big, significant gap in talent at this moment in time in 2025. If you told me Shara versus versus Ian Gary, I'd feel comfortable picking Ian Gary right now, because I feel like Ian Gary is at the peak of where he needs to be while Shara is still climbing. So I think there's a little bit of disrespect to MVP here. Yes, he's getting older. Yes, he's just still into his third fight in the UFC, and Shara's looked so dominant since his run. But if you really think about it, for Shara, incredible fighter, the one-eyed king, but he's had some easier level opponents up until Petrosian. And then, yes, he dominated Petrosian. But when he fought Michael, Olekov, who gives a shit, I have no way I'm pronouncing that name. That was a closer fight than I wanted it to be, even though he did win Fight of the Night. That was, they both won Fight of the Night. I thought Shara would have looked better. And yes, like I said, I know that Shara has been great his whole UFC tenure, but I just feel like experience is the key here. And it sucks because I can absolutely see a crazy situation where Shara takes him down, submits him, and makes it look easy. But I have to believe that MVP wants a title. He's here for a reason. And this would be so demoralizing for him to lose to an up-and-coming contender just now climbing into the ranks. I feel like this is a fight made for MVP to get himself back and slow the reins on Shara Bullet here. UFC likes to do that at times, where you got these guys who are super hyped up, where you kind of have to humble them for a quick second. Like, all right, wait. Because if you could do that, you basically build like a whole year of him before he's at a title fight. So if you can build that whole year for him, I think I like to pretend like I think what the UFC thinks. So I think this one's made for MVP to win. They hope the MVP wins. So I say by split decision, super, super, super close fight, MVP takes it via distance because he's going to make Shara very uncomfortable.
Man, this is just another example of why doing this Dynasty show with you is so spectacular, right? Because I am the owner of Michael Venom Paige. You are the owner of Shara Magomedov. You are picking Michael Venom Paige, and I am picking Shara Magomedov. So no matter what happens here, we're both fucked, right? How about that? Yeah, man, I went back and forth on this one a lot too. I think ultimately what made the difference for me in picking Shara is I think he can get a lot of the same success done that Ian Gary did with those leg kicks on the outside. I think what makes this fight dangerous, obviously, Michael Venom Paige is a sniper out there, man. I love watching him fight. Very reminiscent of that same karate style as Stephen Thompson. Let's never make that fight happen because, goddamn, that'll be horrendous. But I love that we're getting Michael Venom Paige against a striker here, right? We saw last time we thought we was going to get that at Ian Gary, it turned into a wrestling match. I think Shara will end up being the one that shoots if anybody shoots here. And I think obviously you got to give him the edge because of that, because he can do that in this matchup. I like Michael Venom Paige a lot, though. I think I agree with you. I think he has the better skills on the feet, technique for technique. I think Shara's proven that although he gets into those scraps and he lands more times than he doesn't, he also does end up on the receiving ends of a lot of shots too. And I think that in this fight could be a real big problem. But ultimately, I lean towards Shara just because I think he has all the momentum right now. And he also has the deeper bag of skills, despite, in my opinion, being outskilled in his most preferred skill, right? I think if they go strike for strike in this one, and this is a kickboxing match only, I think this is Michael Venom Paige's fight to lose. I think he wins that fight against anyone. We saw that, like you said, against that fight against Kevin Howland. The dude looked like a wizard out there. But I always point to the fight against Douglas Lima, right, where he was able to chop away at those leg kicks and then eventually land a shot that just Michael Venom Paige didn't see coming. I don't think he's been finished since then. But I think in a fight like this, I'm picking Shara Magomedov to win by decision and get some valuable experience. But ultimately, I think if anyone probably is going to get a knockout here, I would be surprised if it was Shara. I think Michael Venom Paige is much liver to catch Shara Magomedov where he is the strongest, because I don't think Shara's scared to engage with him. And I think against someone with the skills like MVP is a mistake. So I'm picking Shara here, but ultimately this is going to be one of my favorite things to see in MMA, where a fighter is really forced to showcase his full skill set. And I think we're going to come out of this one happy with what that skill set looks like. What were you
I
about to
wanted
say,
to
Sean?
ask you because, MVP is a big name to the MMA world, right? He's had some incredible moments in Bellator coming over here. Yes, I think it's a little bit past his prime, but I think he still has enough to really make a run. If he could pull, the best out of him in the UFC. But, you picking Shara here, it kind of makes me question, what do you see for MVP after this? Do you think he considers hanging it up? Do you think he considers like, all right, I got to fight another unranked too? Because he came here to be like one win away from a title shot. That was, all right, give me Kevin Holland and then I'll fight for, number one contender fight and then I'll fight for the title. Beat Kevin Holland, then you got that number one contender fight, lost Ian Gary. Now you're fighting Shara. If you lose to Shara here, I feel like you kind of take a huge step back here. So what do you think would be next for someone like MVP if, following a loss?
It's a great question. He's clearly the older fighter here, which this one means a lot more to him in that way. I think ultimately, though, I think he's here to stick around. I think he's going to be in fun fights no matter what. So it's kind of like I won't be surprised. Hey, if we end up seeing him main event a fucking fight night card next, like that won't be surprising to me at all. But I think ultimately, yeah, man, this is a really tough spot for MVP. He really needs this win. And Shara Magomedov, this is kind of like playing with house money in my opinion. I think I didn't expect him to get this far just based off his skills, period. So the fact that he's gotten up to this point kind of feels like if he gets a loss here, it's not the biggest deal because he just gets to retool and find his way back up. So I agree with you. I think this fight has a lot more stakes for MVP. I think ultimately, though, after this, I don't think he's going to go anywhere else. I think he's going to stay with the UFC, and they'll find somebody. Trust me, they'll find a warm body out there for him to go out there and have a striking match with. So I'm not too worried about MVP's future, too. Just coming off getting married as well. Shout out to him and the missus. Congratulations on that. So he's got a lot to look forward to, but interested to see, right, where his fire is in this fight, right? Does it matter to him as much, like you said? The prospects of a loss here, does that weigh on his mind? Because if it does, I think we're going to see a dangerous MVP. But if this ends up being one of those fights where it's super, super boring and it's just kind of being avoidant, I think that might be a little worse, right, for his long-term prospects right now, because we're looking forward for you to be the exciting guy. And now this is what you're doing. That's just the way the UFC thinks, which is silly in my opinion. But yeah, I agree. I think a loss here would be really bad for MVP, but ultimately, is it the end of the world? I don't think so. I think welterweight is shallow enough that if you get a couple good wins against the right people, you can find yourself back up in that top 5 anyway, just because we're begging for some fresh blood at the top of welterweight.
That's exactly why I picked MVP, because I felt like it was like, it's almost like if he has that fire in him, I think he knows that like he has to win this one to still be in contendership. But then the other one I want to bring you, I'm going to bring this up in the next fight, is for Shara. If he wins, do you think he gets top 5 fighter next?
That's a great question. Based on his skill set, I hope not. Like I hope they take the slow roll and let him keep growing, because I think we have not seen him against anyone that will remotely attempt to take down. So obviously, Michal Oleksiejczuk is one of those guys, but even him, right? Like he's going out there trying to fucking knock you out. So I think there's a lot of skill development that still needs to be done for Shara before he gets somebody in the top 5, because remember, the top 5 in his weight class is a whole bunch of fucking wrestlers. So yeah, man, I think they've been really careful about his matchmaking, so I doubt it'll be top 5. But if it is top 5, it'll probably be somebody like Ian Gary versus somebody like I don't know, fucking Shafkat coming off of that loss. We'll see. He's headed for a title fight anyway.
You have
right?
to be careful, because you can't have Darren Till again. That's the big thing, is you can't. I think they learned their lesson with that, and I think every single up-and-coming prospect, no matter from Bo Nickel to Shara or whoever, they're going to do whatever it takes to take their sweet-ass time. Even if they get a big fight and they lose, it's like a win for them. They're like, oh, all right. Well, guess it looks like it's an extra year for you, buddy. And I think that's a good thing in a way. So, yes, I fully agree with you on that one.
And sometimes it's really worth your time as a promoter to tailor things around a certain guy so that he isn't necessarily facing the biggest test of his career early on, because skills need to develop, man. And I think that's where you see the best fighters. It's hard to do that as a promoter for everyone, right? You can't give everyone the light run. But I think they've been very careful for a reason with Shara. We'll see what happens with that. Now we move on to our main event, the reason why we're all here today. And ladies and gentlemen, I need you to remember, the prelims for this one start at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So the main card for this one is going to be starting at 12 noon. So make sure you're tuned in early, right? Because if not, you're going to miss these fights. Our main event, we got Israel Adesanya minus 157. The number 2 ranked Israel Adesanya going up against the number 5 ranked Nassourdine Imavov plus 140. Now, Sean. Whew, this is a scary one. And I like that I get to lead the dance here because both of these guys are on my dynasty team, right? This has happened now for 2 weeks straight. Of the original fights last week before the Renato Moicano switch, I mean, I think this proves how well I'm drafting, right? But I originally had both title fights, all 4 members were on my team, and now the main event is all on my team again. So you hate to see it, but you love to see it, right? I like having these guys, right? But I don't want them to fucking fight each other. But this matchup is super fun, man. We got the tale of 2 cities, right? The tale of 2 stories. We got a rising prospect, 28 years old, super young, still developing all his skills, going up against somebody who is really at that stage of his career where now it's looked at like he's unk, right? It's looked at like, you might be a gatekeeper now. And that's crazy to think about considering how highly we both thought of Israel Adesanya. Now, this matchup is crazy difficult, right? I think I've been someone that's been shouting out Nassourdine Imavov since 2022 as someone who I think is a dark horse to be a champion in the middleweight division. So I'm high on both these guys, right? I think it's very easy for me to say that. What really scares me about this fight for Israel Adesanya is Nassourdine's skill in pocket exchanges, man. This guy has lightning in his hands, and he doesn't really get to showcase it because of how much he likes to mix it up. But in those pocket exchanges, I think he's going to have a real advantage at landing shots and being the more stingy puncher at range. I think Israel Adesanya is the definition of a technical fighter. I think he's someone that works so well from the outside and really can piece you up, right? He works towards a finish in a way that might not be exciting for most people. But for me, I find it really exhilarating to watch his approach, right? How does he want to diffuse the bomb, so to speak? And I think that's his key to victory here. I think if he can find a way to take the fight out of this fight, right? I think the faster this fight goes, the more it's a double-edged sword here, right? I'm going to say a lot here, so lock in with me, right? Because it might be hard to follow. But I think it's a double-edged sword here. I think the more active and the more fast-paced this fight is, the more it favors Nassourdine Imavov for the first 3 rounds. I think Nassourdine Imavov has a better, stronger grappling game, and if he implements that top control, I think he is going to put Adesanya in a bad place, because I think mentally Adesanya has shown that if you could take him out of his comfort zone, it wears on him throughout the fight. And I think if early and often Nassourdine's taking him down and making him think about that threat, it's only going to set up his hands further later on in the fight. But ultimately, the dangerous aspect of this fight is I really am leaning towards Nassourdine Imavov here. But what ultimately makes me really confused about this fight is I think skill for skill, Nassourdine is in a much better place than Israel Adesanya as an MMA fighter. But when it comes to fighting a 5-round fight, I think Israel Adesanya is much more equipped to do that. And we've seen Nassourdine Imavov gas against Sean Strickland. What makes this fight dangerous, though, is just like the Sean Strickland Israel Adesanya fight, I think the hands of Nassourdine, in addition to the grappling, are going to be a threat to Adesanya. listen, my heart here is with Israel Adesanya. I want Israel Adesanya to win this fight. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like no matter what the range is, the advantages lie with Nassourdine Imavov. But ultimately, I think, funny enough, Adesanya's best path to victory is taking the fight out of the fight, but also finding a way to gas Nassourdine Imavov. And that sounds ridiculous, right? Because those two things are not going to accomplish the other, right? You got to choose one. I would be really excited to see Israel Adesanya put on a game that's pressure-oriented, that is really about putting Nassourdine on the back foot and making him make these calculations, putting stress on his mind so that the further we go on into this fight, the more he feels overwhelmed. I think that's Adesanya's best path to victory, despite how good he is on the outside. I think if he could keep a range kickboxing game with volume, this should be his fight to lose. But ultimately, I think this is just a scary matchup because of the skills that Nassourdine has and obviously the potential he has at this stage of his career. He can look like a completely different fighter in this match compared to he has in the past, and that's very dangerous. This is a tough fight, man. I've waffled back and forth on this one. I think ultimately I've been leaning all day on the underdog, so why not keep it going, man? I think I want Adesanya to win this fight. My heart is going to be rooting for him, but my head says Nassourdine Imavov.
This is tough, man. Another great fight. Another great fight. Because this fight is all about how much has Adesanya fallen. And I think that's the big, proving ground that Adesanya has to come in and show everybody now. Is he done? Is his time at the top over? Or does he still have a little bit left in him? I think it's easy to look at him as he's done. But, he's fought champions. Everyone he's fought is a champion or former champion. And, it's the first time in 6 years, right, where he's not fighting for a championship before a belt. And in those 6 years, what he's had, like 9 fights or more than that, probably. He's done it all. You're talking about an up-and-comer at the highest level in this division to a guy who's literally been at the top. Like Anderson Silva 2.0 in a way. Obviously, Anderson Silva had a little bit of a better resume, but also killed it with the fucking 6 in a row or 7 in a row losses. So I hope and pray that Adesanya can pull something here because it's 5 rounds, I feel a little bit better for Adesanya. I really do. Because if this was 3, I don't think this fight actually would be that close. I think Imavov would have been the favorite. But I think that you're going into Adesanya's world in a way where he's so used to 25 minutes of straight dog-on-dog fight. Like, he will give you everything. I think the only fight that I was really ever super disappointed in was the Cannonier fight. But even in that one, like, he's been so dominant and he's had such a great reign that Izzy has faced better grapplers and stronger guys and faster hands in his prime than what Imavov is going to bring. And Imavov isn't even at his peak yet. So this is still like an up-and-comer versus like a former champ in a way of like, if this was a year from now, I think Imavov would be a heavy favorite. But I have to believe that I will give him the benefit of the doubt being the champion that he was. I still think he's still got top fights left in him. So I'm going to pick Adesanya because it is 5 rounds. And I like being different. I feel like we have a lot of differences in this card. And this is good because this is either going to really be bad for me or really be bad for you. And most likely for me. But I feel like in this one, I'm going with the older guys to prove who they used to be. And like I said, I talked to you about this before we started recording, that Imavov, Ikram, all these guys are like, I mix them together so much. That's how much I care about them, and their potential is so high that sometimes I think they're the same person. And even though they're nowhere near the same person, It's just I don't know what it is. I just confused the two. But Imavov is going to be fighting for a belt one day. Win or lose, he will be there again. I just hope that Adesanya hasn't fallen too much. I think it's easy to look at the Sean Strickland fight. I think he lost a part of his soul fighting Alex Pereira twice. A guy who's already probably 20, 30 pounds heavier than him going into the octagon. It took literally whatever that, show he watches and the higher power, whatever that is, to win that fight, because it really did feel like some anime sort of stuff to beat Alex Pereira like that. And then, you lose to Sean Strickland. I think that was a crazy fight that, he just couldn't defend against. He couldn't go forward. And Sean Strickland just beat him in the technical way. And then, you take the time off, which he deserved. He fought like 3 times a year for 5 years in a row, and then comes back versus Dricus, who, people think like that's what makes Adesanya watch. But, Dricus came in and beat the shit out of Whitaker,
Who hasn't Dricus
exactly.
beat, goddammit?
And at the time, Dricus wasn't the guy we were like, I don't think he'll ever be champion. Maybe. But he proved it. And now Dricus is about to fight next week. And he's proven to be a real champion. I have him beating Sean Strickland in the rematch. So it's not like Adesanya's lost to anyone that's been a scrub or someone that he shouldn't have lost to. They're all champions. So I think this is one where people try to write off Adesanya as quick as possible. I think a lot of it has to do with Anderson Silva a little bit, with how quickly he was at the top and how quickly he fell. And I still think he's got something in there. And I think you can humble an up-and-coming prospect who's going to be in the title one day. It doesn't matter what you do in this fight. He'll get there. And I still think Adesanya's got a little bit left in the gas tank. I commend Imavov for beating someone like Brendan Allen, who had that peak just like him at a time where I thought he was going to have to fight for a belt. He beat Cannonier, who also, Adesanya beat in his prime. Roman Dolidze, great fights. But Adesanya's faced better. So I think 25 minutes, I know I just fucking told a story, but for 25 minutes, I think you're playing into Adesanya's world now. And maybe Imavov looks better for the first 10, but I think Adesanya will be very, very technical. And I want to see. I know he's not going to be this Adesanya anymore, but I don't think he's this. I think he's still right here. So I think Adesanya wins via points. I think it's going to be a really good fight. And I think Adesanya squeaks by. But I think this is going to be an amazing moment for Imavov, win or lose, because he'll know exactly what it's like to face a champion and one of the best champions ever in the middleweight division in UFC history. So give me Adesanya, but Imavov could take it.
Wow, you built this fight up for me big time. I was already super looking forward to it. I was super looking forward to it already, but I need that. I need that win. I think a lot of people don't understand how much of a big fan of Israel Adesanya I really am, right? This guy's my Twitter fucking banner since day one. Shout out. I love me some Izzy Adesanya, and I want him to win here. I just think ultimately skills pay the bills, man. And the pocket striking specifically, in addition to the grappling advantage, is really just spooky to me, right? With the way that Dricus was able to get that rear naked choke, I think there was a certain ease to it that definitely worries me here. And Nassourdine is someone from Dagestan that throws that Dagestani handcuff around too. This is just such a weird fight. It's such a tough fight to pick, in my opinion. So great caliber of fighters, honestly, skills that you don't really see at middleweight, right? We're shitting on a lot of people, but I think both of these guys are super skilled, and we're going to get an awesome fight here. But just like that, Sean, we move on to the most important, the most critical part of this show, the part where we get to draft some dynasty fighters, God damn it.
Forget about
and
this.
Just like that, I have the comfort of having the first pick. I've waffled about a couple of ways, a lot of different ways I could have went with this one. There's a lot of prospects that I really enjoy, especially guys like Hamdy, who are in a lighter division, right? A division where it might be a little bit easier to get some wins. But ultimately, I think I've settled on my number one pick, and I think it's pretty obvious. I'm going with Muhammed Naimov, the pride of Tajikistan.
That's rough. That's rough because that's who I wanted. You know what? It's going to be weird that I'm doing this. But give me, for this time and this time only, give me this guy thought I was going to take Terrance Mckinney. Give me.
You saw that, right?
This guy already did the copy paste. Give me Oliviera there. Give me.
Ooh, even though you picked
Yes.
Saeed. Wow.
Because now I hope you're
Love
right.
that.
I hope. I really do. And I really do believe he can be great.
Yeah. You could have picked Saeed.
I could have.
I don't know.
But I
I'm
don't.
just saying.
I told you, for Saeed, I feel like he doesn't
fight enough.
He I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just something he can't get a visa to come over. I don't know what it is. But I just feel like Oliveira wants it so badly. I just think at this moment, Saeed can win that fight. But I'm literally going to be hoping that Oliveira pulls this one off because he's had a great run so far. And I think with a win against Said would be fucking huge and take him to new lengths.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. So before we get out of here, let me just give you a rundown of what the Dynasty team matchup is looking like going into this week. UFC Fight Night, Abu Dhabi. Saudi Arabia. We got our first women's fight in Saudi Arabia too. So we're looking to make some history here. For Sean's squad, we have the number 14th ranked Shara Magomedov, the number 9 ranked Jairzinho Rosenstruck, the number 14th ranked Shamil Gaziev, and of course, Vinicius Oliveira, who he just drafted. I have the number 2 ranked Israel Adesanya, the number 5 ranked Nassourdine Imavov, the number 15 ranked MVP, the number 4 ranked Sergey Pavlovich, Thomas Peterson, Ziam, Mike Davis, Lucas Alexander, Mayra Bueno Silva, and Muhammed Naimov, which brings me already to a 2-2 record, right? I got 2 head-to-heads against my own guys, but we also have 2 head-to-heads against each other, right? So this is going to be a real consequential week, not just in Dynasty, but also in the pick'ems. We got a lot to look forward to in this one. I love that we are 6 out of 11 fights we are different on, we disagree with each other on. So there's going to be a lot of parity here, no matter who ends up being the winner of the week. But I'm looking forward to it, Sean. You've been kicking my ass, bro. I really need this one. So hopefully you can fucking cooperate. But on the way out, just remind the people where they can find you.
You can find me at bsreports.org. And that's where I'll be now because I don't have any sort of social media basically anymore. So find me there, and I will help you get started in the sports world if you ever want to get in. My email is on the bottom.
You heard the man. You can find me at Negron MMA on Twitter and TikTok, Chris Negron _ on Instagram. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with us. As always, we look forward to Saturday. We look forward to the fights. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We got 9 weeks straight, motherfuckers. So you better buckle up. You better be tuned in because the work does not stop here. We're going to be on the grind for the next many, many weeks. So make sure you're tuned in to the brand at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube. And just like that, we're done. We are through. We'll catch you all next week. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, when things get tough, right? When the going gets rough, just remember, at least you are not the Muhammad Usman of your brothers. We'll catch you all next week. Peace.